I want to say good morning, welcome you. My name is Renee Greenfield. I am the head of the Carroll School, and we are so thrilled to host you for this morning's information session. I'm joined by a bunch of folks on the call who you will get to meet. Stacy Daniels, Kristen Curry, and Erica from Team Admissions. My colleague Osa is here, our Director of DEI. Amy Dempster, our Communication Director, is here. Allison West, our Middle School Division Head, is here. And you'll be joined later on this morning by Kate Collins, our Upper School Head, and Sue Kingman, our Lower School Head. So welcome. Let's get started. Like I mentioned before, it's chilly, but warm inside, and kids are hard at work here. So we'll do our best to bring you inside Carroll throughout this webinar. And I want to start with our mission statement. It's where we start all of our work. Everything we do moves through the lens of this mission statement. So I want to read it aloud to you, and then I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Stacy Daniels. So here's our mission statement. Carroll School empowers children with language-based learning differences, such as dyslexia, to become academically skilled students who are strong self-advocates and confident lifelong learners. Carroll is an inclusive community committed to embracing diverse strengths, identities, and lived experiences in order to give each child what they most need to thrive. So thanks for being here. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Stacy.
Thanks, Renee. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll just take a moment to go over a few logistics for this morning. So we will be recording this. If there's anyone you know who wasn't able to make it here this morning, or kind of friend, colleague, Aunt Sue who would like to see it, we'll make a recording link available to you after today. The morning here, this first part is set up very much like a presentation, which means that you can see us, we can't see you. We've disabled the chat. However, we're very interested in questions or comments that you might have. So you probably know the Zoom convention by now, as we all do, but there's a Q&A button. So feel free to put things in there during the presentation. If we're not able to address during our time together in this first part, we'll kind of take a look. And then when you go to the second part, to the breakout by grade, we'll try and address those questions there. From an organizational standpoint, we're going to spend some time here together till about 10:25 in this sort of large webinar space. And then what you'll do is you'll log out and you'll join an individual grade level meeting. Kristen Curry, my colleague, can put some links into the chat so that you can have them in case you weren't able to register in advance. Not a problem. Please join. What that will look like is if you are looking at first through third grade, that would be the grade next year, you would go to what we call the BR3 room. If your child next year is a rising fourth or fifth grader, you would join that room. And then of course we have one for sixth, we have one for seventh. And then if you've got a student who'll be a new eighth grader or a new ninth grader next year, you would join the upper school. So that's sort of what the construct of the morning will look like. Let me kind of take us forward a little bit to just preview some of the topics. So the essence of the presentation today, and you'll hear us say this over and over, at Carroll School, we give every child what they most need. We acronym everything, and so GEC is our shorthand for this. A lot of schools say this, a lot of schools promise this, not exactly with the acronym. We are fiercely committed to doing this, and there's the whole kind of don't tell me, show me. This presentation will actually show you how we truly do this. So what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to take you through the very specific profile, that one type of learner that we educate distinctively well. I'm going to look at a kind of complex series of graphics to help you understand how rigorously we create class groupings. My colleague Allison West is going to talk a little bit about the underpinnings of the brain-based work that we do. So we focus heavily on kind of skills and strategies in the classroom work, but then we're also really thinking about the science of why our kids struggle. And then we'll pass it off to Osa, who's going to talk about how we hold this together with rigorous faculty expertise and training. And finally, Sue Kingman will round it off talking about the community and our vibrant school culture. It's important for you to understand that Carroll is a complete school. So not only do we address skills, strategies, and those brain-based efficiencies that I just mentioned, we're also committed to the sort of whole child and complete independent school experience. So why does this school work? And again, you're going to hear us say this, because we give every child what they most need. And we are experts at teaching to this one profile. I'm just going to ask you to go ahead, Erica, one slide. Great. We have 447 students here at Carroll. We have 447 individual programs, 447 individual learning plans, 447 different parent conversations, sometimes, and caregiver conversations, sometimes times 2, times 3, times 4 a year. Sometimes times 5. We are very committed to individuating and focused on the ultimate goal, which is to close the gap in your child's or your student's education. So let's take a look at that profile that I mentioned. And I'm just going to use this term generally. I'm going to go through a series of things to help describe a profile. And please understand, if this doesn't sort of textbook describe the child that you're here to learn more about, that there are variabilities that I'll talk more about later in the programming. So many of you have a psychoeducational evaluation, something from your school, or you have a private neuropsychological evaluation. And in that evaluation, you have something called cognitive testing. This is kind of classic IQ testing. And the one that I'm going to speak about today is called the WISC. Many of you have that, not all of you. It's completely fine. I'll try and speak in somewhat general terms to help you kind of get your minds around it. What we notice in the majority of our students, though not all, is that they tend to have high verbal comprehension indexes. So what does that mean, right? In your mind, you think, wow, I have a child that I'm here to talk about, a student who has a language-based learning challenge. How is it that their verbal comprehension is high? In that subtest, takes a look at kind of vocabulary and a child's ability to draw verbal analogies using language. What we find is our students are quite linguistic in that way. They're quite talented orators, even if they struggle sometimes with some word finding or a little bit with the articulation. They tend to do well in that domain. We also see that our students tend to be, again, generally strong in something called fluid reasoning, which maps very closely with mathematical skills. And what that looks like from the testing perspective is take away the words and ask students to solve problems without the language. So there's some balancing of scales, some visual algebra. And what we find is that our students are quite talented at that in many cases. They are, as they are in the verbal comprehension realm, really keen problem solvers. What our kids struggle with is more the persnickety, the rote memorization, some of the coding aspects, but they're terrific intellects and terrific thinkers. The hallmark of the student that we see here at Carroll is around these next 2 domains that you see on your screen, the working memory and the processing speed. That's where we tend to notice that students have weaker working memory and slower processing speeds, one or both, relative to some of those higher scores in the verbal comprehension and the fluid reasoning. So what is working memory? Working memory is a kind of temporary chalkboard of the brain. It's this very sort of small, it's a small window of time where we hold little bits of information that we can readily use. It factors heavily into our ability to decode words. So for example, if you go to sound out, and I'll take a really simplistic word, I'll use the word cat, and you go k, a, t. For most of us who do not have weaker working memories, we're able to hang on to those 3 syllables, right? Or even multisyllabic words, photosynthesis. But for our students and many of our caregivers and parents, when one goes to sound out all of those sounds, it is very common to get to the 3rd sound and have forgotten the 1st sound. It's difficult to hold on to that. And now we know that we can train working memories to get stronger through practice, through some of the brain-based interventions, but inherently it is a vulnerability for our students who, again, are really great problem solvers, really talented intellects. The other component of the vulnerability in our profile tends to be this processing speed. And for many of you, you know this as the wait, what moment. It's our ability to churn things quickly and efficiently through our brains. And for our students, this can take a little more time. So those four tend to define our students. What we notice is in this fifth domain, the visual spatial, which is block design, Legos, puzzles, some of that, there's variability. We see for some of our students, it's actually their highest scores, their largest peak. And for others, it is something that they are challenged by. And so for all of this, this is what our program is sort of built around. What we're also looking for when we read everything you submit in Ravenna, and thank you, it is a labor of love to apply to Carroll School. We are committed to making this as easy as possible, even with all of the uploads. And there's a parent statement, which we ask you, please don't worry about writing any long prose. We're just trying to get your family and your child just a little bit, even a few bullet points, some adjectives. Please make this easy on yourself. We're really just trying to understand if we have what your child needs. Erica, who is the front line of Ravenna and the sort of admission engine, is happy to help with all of that, as we all are. So aside from this cognitive profile that I described, the other things that we're looking for in admission are a history of phonological struggles. We're looking for whether the student you're here to talk about, the child that you're here to talk about, is in middle school, has partially remediated themselves out of a diagnosis, although they still carry it, that they did not acquire the sound symbol connection readily with automaticity. So we're looking for holes and gaps in what their knowledge base might be. We're also looking for, this is one of our favorite things when we're reading in admission, for that series of notable strengths. We have kids who are fantastic at Fab Lab, something we have here, the Lego, the robotics, the engineering. We have artists and athletes and writers and mathematicians, and maybe someone's a fantastic hockey player. We love reading about those things, those places in our kids' lives where they excel, those places where they've built resilience and they shine. Those are so important for us to learn about. And at a base, we're always looking for a language-based learning challenge, whether that be a specific learning disability in reading or writing and at times math, or whether it is actually dyslexia per se. It depends on who's writing the report, what that might say. There's often questions around our ability to work with students who have attentional challenges. And I think what we find is that 40 to 60% of our students have some attentional challenges, whether that's diagnosed or not, and that it is secondary to the language-based challenge, right? So it's not uncommon. We have many different mechanisms and strategies and things that we do here to help support that learner as well, but it is not the primary area of challenge. I think some of the other questions we get have to do with nonverbal learning disability, autism spectrum disorder, and unfortunately, those are diagnoses that we are not well equipped to address here at Carroll. We're glad to work with any parent and sort of make some recommendations, to look at some testing. So feel free to email us something if you've got some questions after this about your child. Feel free to ask us in those individual breakout rooms, or schedule a phone call. As I said, we want to make this as easy as possible. So that was sort of a deeper dive. And again, just kind of going, this is a general profile of our student. So how does this sort of play out in the span of grades that we have here at Carroll? I'm just going to show you some of the numbers. And I think there's two important things to notice on this slide. The first of which is how, as a school, we start fairly small, which makes complete sense. We call our BRs first graders. Our first and second graders, there's not as many people in the know on a diagnosis, but as by third grade, fourth grade, we start to really grow in size. And you can see in our middle school, we tend to get pretty close to 80 kids per grade as more and more people sort of find out and are clued in. And then, of course, we have our upper school program, which is 50 kids. It is for new 8th graders and for 9th graders, whether those 9th graders came from Lincoln or whether they rose up from the upper school 8. It's an intentionally small program with a 9th grade high school year. If you're here thinking about that, you'll be joining a room later with Kate Collins and my colleague Dave Barkin to kind of learn more about that program. I think the other thing to notice here is the number of students and the number of educators that we have. I think that may look very different than your current institution. I think we go at this hard. We go at this rigorous. Again, as I said in the beginning, the ultimate goal is to close the gap for every student. So let's talk a little bit more about actually how we do this. That was the promise I made you. I was going to show you how. And that has to do with our focus, and that focus on that one type of learner that I took a bit of a deep dive in the profile slide. And so I'm going to take you through a series of graphics. Thank you to all the people who now have carpal tunnel from designing these, but I think they work really well to help you understand how we do this. So the school you might be in now, in the traditional school model, whether that be public or independent, charter, parochial, whatever it may be, I'm going to use the construct of about 48 students, which is what we have in our 4th grade here. And then I'll also kind of bridge a little bit to middle school examples as well. So what you notice is that there's a series of students, blue and orange. The students in orange are what we might call the neurotypical learners, or the non-language-based learners. And then these people in blue are the kids who probably should be at Carroll and who might learn best here. And what you notice is in most school systems, they'll take this large group of students, break them into a few classes, and this educator is responsible for teaching all of these students. Now, this is a broad swath to address, right? And that teacher actually has much less data available to them than we might have at Carroll. But they are meant to address kind of all of the needs of these language-based learning challenged students and all of these other students who might be neurotypical. And that's a really difficult job for anyone, especially if they don't have the proper training. So how does this look at Carroll then? I'm just going to move ahead one slide. At Carroll, we're separating out, right? We're kind of sifting for that profile that I described, and we're focused on and experts at teaching that one type of learner, that really intellectual, motivated, someone who I've described many times as fantastic problem-solving student who's really needs to be taught in an environment that is immersive, where people are trained to teach to this profile. So I'm going to take you through how this looks a little bit. I spent a lot of time talking in very general terms. And as we know that we, on our 447 students, that there's a lot of variability, right? So I'm going to shade all of these things, various colors of blue, to show you how we do this. And again, in admission and when we're creating groupings and even during the year, we're constantly studying the data. We're constantly thinking about who is your child, what is the progression, what is the learning, what are the needs of the child. And so as we think about this, we take all of these shades of blue, and what if I were to divide them into language groupings? How would that look? So we take these people and we divide them into, kind of, you can see here, these smaller classes, all configured very carefully around strengths and challenges. And when I spent some time talking with their curriculum leaders, the head of the language departments, they tell me that they look at between 26 and 36 different variables when creating these groupings. And now what you might notice is, these groups are, from one end to the other, are all working on very different things. So at one end, it might be working very much at the word level, decoding, building a little bit to the sentence level, really focusing on the frameworks and the basics of reading. And then as through the progression of our curriculum, no matter what age you are, you might move more into the writing pieces of it at the sentence level, at the paragraph level. And then finally, the ultimate goal kind of being more around comprehension, inferencing, and so forth. And again, I sort of said to you, I had been thinking about this in a lower school model with these 48-ish students. And just to give you kind of you can see it up there on the screen, how this looks in the middle school. This year we have 79 sixth graders, and they are in about 10 different language classes. But would this make sense for us to do exactly the same thing in math? Probably not, if we're really thinking about it. So what we do is we take all of those students in those language classes and we reconfigure for math. And as you'll notice, some of these groups are very small. We have students, as I said, who may have some sort of challenge in the areas of math, those cognitive pieces that make some of the fluency and automaticity pieces in the language side of the house also make learning mathematics complicated as well. We also have very, very talented mathematicians who can generalize and be in sort of larger classroom settings. And again, using this fourth grade construct in the visuals, the sixth grade, for example, has 10 different sections of math. One more piece of the curriculum that I wanted to kind of take you through is what does this look like in advisory, for example? And so I've talked about the curricular pieces of language and math. But then we know we need to be addressing some of the softer skills. So twice a day, every student meets with their advisor at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. And at the beginning, it might look more along the lines of previewing, checking in, checking materials, getting grounded, getting centered, some share in a circle of some kind, getting settled after a commute. We are a school that pulls this year from about 90-ish cities and towns. So it's something that can just take a moment to kind of get centered as a class. And at the end of the day, it looks more like in the morning as well, but it looks more like skills around executive function. Let's plan, do we have our homework binders? Do we have all the stuff that we need? And thinking about not only educating our kids in some of the areas of vulnerability when it comes to skills and the cognitive efficiencies, but also as a whole learner, as a student that needs to go on during their life at Carroll and beyond Carroll with some really set strategies for how they organize themselves, how they plan, and how they think about their academics. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass this off to my colleague, Allison West, who is the division head for the middle school. And she's going to continue with this a little bit to talk a little bit more about some of the other pieces of the curriculum at Carroll, Flex Block and Focus Area. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you, Stacy. And good morning. I'm so happy to be with you all here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about our focus area and Flex Block. And these are two opportunities within our schedule where we're able to give each child what they need at a very deep level. These are the blocks where we can even further customize instruction around the specific needs of each and every student at Carroll. In these blocks, instruction can range anywhere from a one-on-one tutorial to a small group. And as you can see in this dark blue block here, the topics or the courses can range from Orton Gillingham tutorial, you see RAVO up here, math, fluency, a number of different courses that all align with what the research tells us students need to develop in order to become their best academic selves. So these are the blocks, again, where we can take all those blue people that you just saw Stacy moving around and place them into groups that are even more diagnostic and prescriptive. In many public schools, students will experience classes where they are pulled out in order to receive this really specific direct instruction. And we're fortunate enough at Carroll to not have to do that. Every single child is assigned a focus area block and a flex block. So you might be thinking, you know, how can we do that? How do we configure these groups? And I'll just take a moment to share that this is a process that is very in-depth. And we have teams of people in the lower, middle, and upper school who are really careful at analyzing all the data that you provide to us and all the data that we gather internally. Our program is incredibly diagnostic and prescriptive, and we are constantly, almost obsessively gathering data in the form of formal and informal data to really be rigorous in our progress monitoring. And so while these blocks are able to allow us to get at extremely discrete levels, we are constantly creating these checks and balances just to make sure that we've got things just right. Moving on, what I want to share is technically about 62% of a student's academic day is considered hardcore academics. And you can see those represented here in the dark blue slices, where we have our structured language, those focus area classes that I was just talking about, and math. But in reality, our students can really only spend so much time doing these hard things. That productive struggle is potentially exhausting. And so what we have aimed to do in the design of our program is also capitalize on the areas of strengths. And so the rest of our program typically are areas of strengths for our student. And we often refer to these areas as the dyslexic advantages, because many of these areas come more easily to our students and they really feed their gifts and strengths. So classes like history and science, engineering and design, really delving into social justice, embracing arts and music, having opportunities to show leadership and service, outdoor education in the form of bounders, and a variety of clubs that we offer. And so what you hopefully are seeing here in this pie chart is that we really do try to create a program for every student that aims to balance some fun and that productive struggle, but also we build in lots of opportunities for joy throughout their day. And I want to also explain a little bit about how we go beyond the academics. So while building student skills and strengths within academics is clearly a priority and key to our program, we really do go beyond. Neuroscience has taught us that it is actually essential that we delve deeper into understanding the neurological foundations of why our students struggle. Those really help us do the GEC and to help to develop an academic program that is successful. And what we aim to do is identify particular neuropathways that tend to create those roadblocks for our students. And we then deliver targeted interventions that are designed to strengthen those pathways. And these interventions are closely connected to the latest brain science. And being in the greater Boston area, we're super fortunate to have a pretty strong research partnership with MIT. Here's an example of one of our lower schools teachers, Ms. Siegel, and she's facilitating some cognitive games with two of our youngest students. So our cognitive approach is a combination of in-person game-based and also computer-based. The bottom line here is that strengthening these cognitive skills translates to better academic outcomes for our students. And listed here on the left, we have some of the vulnerabilities in processing speed, reaction time, working memory, executive functioning, visual thinking, and logical reasoning. And we have interventions that are used that we have tailored to strengthen each of these cognitive skills. But I'm gonna mute myself for a moment because my colleague here on this video, I think, does a pretty excellent job in describing exactly what this looks like.
What is targeted cognitive intervention? Bright, motivated students come to Carroll School with language-specific learning challenges such as dyslexia. These children share a similar learning profile. They struggle to read. But when we look closer, we've uncovered that there are underlying cognitive differences. Many of these students have weaknesses in one or more cognitive capacity, how their brains process, organize, and use information. Take the word bat. You probably just read that on the screen. Simple, right? But when we look at brain activity while reading bat, you get a different perspective. Brain scans reveal so much going on. This is the reading network. It links visual recognition, auditory language, and executive function areas. Not only are these regions themselves crucial, but efficient communication among them is essential for one's ability to read. Think of it as a set of roads connecting important landmarks in the brain. When the road is narrow and full of potholes or backed up with traffic, it takes longer to get from point A to point B. When neural pathways are weak or underdeveloped, the brain's capacity to benefit from instruction is diminished. Armed with this data, we set out to find a way to optimize these cognitive capacities, to pave the roads and turn those pathways into superhighways. What was our solution? Targeted cognitive intervention. Remember our bright students with dyslexia? Their brains work incredibly hard to learn. We asked, what if we could drive faster communication between different brain regions to develop a stronger, more efficient reading network? Partnering with scientists, doctors, cognitive specialists, computer geniuses, and inspired teachers, we developed a training program to do just that, targeted cognitive intervention. TCI is a data-informed educational practice designed to strengthen the reading network in the brain. It includes computer-based assessments and games, regular progress monitoring, and teacher coaching tailored to help students build a cognitive toolbox that they can carry with them throughout their lives. TCI is built to work within a school environment alongside other academic classes. So how does TCI work? Prior to training, each student is given a pre-assessment to measure cognitive functions. Our software crunches the data and we create a cognitive profile for that student. The student is then assigned to a program based on their area of greatest need. In a classroom with a teacher, the student works on a set of activities that targets his or her specific cognitive weakness. Throughout the program, the software helps teachers monitor progress and provide individualized coaching to ensure that the child stays on track. At the end of each round of TCI, a post-test is given to determine which areas have improved. Reports are accessed through the platform by teachers who can use the data in different ways to understand and support each child's unique profile. Maybe you're wondering what results we're seeing. We're so glad you asked. In addition to helping us understand individual profiles, the TCI platform allows us to study data on a group level in order to discover exciting, large-scale trends and patterns among our population. One of the things we found is that improvements in reaction time are most strongly associated with word identification, which in turn is a major predictor of oral reading fluency, a child's ability to read a passage out loud. When we combine TCI training with Carroll's highly individualized reading curriculum, the results are astounding, even to cognitive scientists. Students are moving across percentile bands in oral reading fluency, a feat that many say is not possible. Why is this important? The ability to read fluently is crucial for academic success. Most exciting for us, as a school for children who struggle with dyslexia, is that we are significantly closing the achievement gap for our students.
So I hope you enjoyed that video. My colleague Sarah definitely is able to explain that with those visuals in a way that I think helps us to really understand the impact. And what's most exciting is that we do have the data to support that there is this link between the work we're doing with targeted cognitive intervention and academic outcomes. Okay, so I would like to introduce you to my friend Binny here. You've heard a lot of talking, right, about how we teach to a specific profile of student, that we have over 440 unique versions of that particular profile, and we strive to give each of those students what they need. Have you heard that yet? That we give each child what they most need? Well, I'd like to take an opportunity to share with you an example of just how we do that. And we do that by collecting data that tracks academic growth, along with that data that helps us understand and define that student's cognitive profile. So this is Binny, and Binny is now a graduate. I had the pleasure of teaching Binny when he was in the middle school, but here he is in 3rd grade. And I want to orient you to this, sometimes we call this a spider web chart, and I want to orient you to this blob here that you see in the middle. As this blob grows out toward the outside of this web, This is representing growth in specific skill areas or cognitive domains. And each line of the web that's going around in the circle represents a percentile line, a national percentile line, with the closest to the center representing the 10th percentile. So it as you build out, they're performing stronger. Along the outside of the web, these words represent the assessment tools that we are using to collect academic and cognitive data. For example, at the very top at 12 o'clock, you can see that elision, which is a phonological processing task, was very underdeveloped for Binny in the 3rd grade. He was very close to that 10th percentile. Whereas segmenting sounds, which is just to the right of elision, falls within the average range. And what this shows us very visually and quickly is that there's uneven development in the phonological processing skills, and that's going to require targeted, individualized instruction. Phonological processing, we know, is a foundational skill for literacy. Moving along here, we can see the same is true for both word attack and ID. And we can see at about 6 o'clock, the reading fluency represents a challenge, a pretty significant challenge at that, along with the visual working memory capacity and reading comprehension, which is sort of up in that 9, 10 o'clock range. And so the reading comprehension we know is likely a result of the decoding and fluency challenges. So it's important for us to look at listening comprehension at about 11 o'clock here, and we can see that's a strength. So that confirms for us, Binny doesn't have a comprehension issue. It's really around decoding and fluency. And so we aim to build a program that's going to help him build those skills. Moving on to 5th grade, we can see that the growth Binny has made as a result of that targeted instruction and careful attention at giving him just what he needs. His phonological processing skills, which are up at that 12 and 1 o'clock area, are fully developed. And we can see steady growth in his word ID and word attack skills. Fluency remains an area of need for Binny, and in the 5th grade, he did continue to receive targeted instruction in building the fluency and automaticity of his oral reading. Similarly, when we look at reading comprehension again, we can see that it has improved, but that's another area that's going to continue to require some really careful attention. But wow, look at that executive functioning right about 8 o'clock. That growth is impressive. This is telling us that he's developed strategies for shifting his attention between different tasks, and he's growing into a more strategic student. Another impressive growth point we can see here is his visual working memory capacity, which is at about that 9 o'clock area. And as you heard earlier, working memory is absolutely essential. It is required for reading. And so over his time in the lower school, he has had opportunities through that cognitive intervention to build that working memory capacity. Now, while at one time it was believed that these cognitive capacities were really fixed and we just had to kind of deal with it, research has shown that the power of neuroplasticity is real. And we have this data that is showing us that we can actually change the way that the brain is processing information. And it's represented here on this chart. So let's now look at Binny in 7th grade. What a handsome guy. And in 7th grade, we can see that Binny's spider chart, this blob, has continued to grow in really beautiful ways. We see that there is still variability throughout his academic and cognitive development, as we all would have as humans, but our data is showing that he has developed a solid foundation. Many of these areas are at or above the 50th percentile, and all of the areas fall with what is described as the average range. We can see here that fluency remained an area of challenge for him in 7th grade. And I can share with you that throughout his 7th and 8th grade years, developing his fluency and automaticity continued to be a focus of targeted instruction. Now, hopefully this demonstration of using an actual student was able to show you how we take all of these bits and pieces to create an academic program that is leading to some pretty impressive gains in both academic and cognitive outcomes. Now I'm going to turn this over to my colleague Osa, who is going to share some insight into the number one factor of student success, which you may find surprising.
All right. Thank you, Allison. Good morning, y'all. It's so nice to be here with you all. So yes, a common theme that you've probably picked up here is that Carroll strives to give each child what they most need in order to actualize their growth. And as Allison posed, a question that you may be thinking about when we think about children and their development is, what is that number one factor that contributes to their success? Some may say it's motivation, work ethic, or even maybe the impact of the curriculum or a specific intervention. And while all of those factors are significant and are relevant to a child's development, years of research has shown that the number one factor that contributes to a child's success is the impact of the individual teacher, right? So Carroll has a really deep commitment to providing professional development that is not only robust and rigorous, but is 100% targeted towards helping our teachers with our specific population of learners. Every Friday, our students end their day around noon, and at that time, our educators become students in per se, and we take part in collaborative training. So I'm just going to talk briefly about some of the ways that Carroll provides training for our faculty. The first thing that I will discuss is our approach to coaching. Every faculty member has a coach with whom they meet with on a regular basis, and our coaches are there to provide support and feedback. They discuss student action plans. They analyze student data, such as the spider chart that Allison showed previously, and they develop curriculum and so much more. Another really important part of our training is the opportunity to learn from experts in the field. We have speakers who lead our community in workshops and training, and they help enhance our pedagogy and help us to grow as educators. In the past, we've had visits from folks such as Marianne Wolf, Sarah Ward, and Kristen Jacobson, Rosetta Lee, Lynn Lyons, and Dr. Nadine Gabb. It's been, for me personally, such a pleasure to connect and learn from not just these folks, but many others. In addition to workshops and trainings from experts in the field, we also use our Friday afternoons and other professional development days to gather in what we call PLCs. PLCs stand for Professional Learning Communities. And at Carroll, all of our faculty and staff are assigned to a PLC. The PLCs span across all divisions and functions, and these groups of 12 to 15 people meet regularly throughout the year to share their expertise. We build community and culture within our groups, and we collaborate and problem solve. And the unique thing about our PLCs is that we've used them for the past 5 years to really focus on topics and issues centered around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And we recognize that that is such a vital part of our training as educators and the work that we do, whether you are a person who is student-facing or non-student facing. The last thing that I will talk about is that here at Carroll that we also are very fortunate to have a collaborative graduate program with Lesley University, whereby we have graduate interns who learn firsthand within our classrooms, alongside our teachers, and within our graduate classes who are taught by Carroll educators, right? And so much of our work is wrapped up in not only helping to really give our faculty the skills they need to help improve and support their students' learning, but also to really help our students feel like they belong in this community authentically. So there's so much more to share, but at this time, I'm going to happily turn it over to my good colleague, Sue Kingman, who is our lower school division head.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here as well, sharing this time with you and my colleagues. My time here is really to be centered more so on the whole child as it relates to giving each child what they need most. And you've heard so much about that this morning, and how much, as Osen described, of a high priority we put on training our teachers. And that's because we expect them to be very attuned to what students need in all domains of learning. Diagnostically understanding their strengths and weaknesses, understanding an educational experience that really speaks to those characteristics. And that's where GEC comes in. And in this GEC prescription for each child is at the center, that prescription is always at the center of our thinking. And I wanted to emphasize that within GEC also sits our steadfast commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In order to fully GEC a child, we believe that we must provide an experience that all children of all backgrounds are seen and heard. This year and last year, we have focused on a theme of belonging and perspective taking, and in which we are working as adults in our year-long PLCs that also referred to, that where we really spend dedicated time on finding ways for folks to broaden their perspectives and understand difference. Today, in fact, many of us were a little late getting to this presentation because we were kicking off what we are celebrating today as a whole school, and we are celebrating Ruby Bridges, in which today in the lower school, we welcomed 50 of our upper school, our 8th and 9th grade students, to our campus to be able to work with our younger children on a project that really represents our commitment to equity and our commitment to diversity in a way that really celebrates Ruby's life. And it's a continual commitment that we've made as we welcomed Ruby to our campus many years ago, and our commitment at this time every year to celebrate her journey, her accomplishments. And so we are very excited to be able to roll that out today. So one of the things that is really critical is for our children to have a sense of belonging, and for us to be a community where people feel as though they belong and see that their needs, they will be understood and their needs will be met. And we have a philosophy that we have to address a child's social, emotional, and identity needs. And this sense of belonging is really critical to bringing a sense of security and a feeling of being understood that our kids need to help them thrive in a learning environment. And we subscribe to the philosophy of that belonging is directly tied to academic success. When a child feels secure, comfortable, and understood in a learning community, it opens up capacity for greater learning. Many of your children may not be feeling that way, and we find that we work very purposely to make sure that happens. So we go about creating this sense of connection at Carroll in both a purposeful and a natural way. And purposefully, what we do is we really dedicate time in the beginning of the day, in our small advisory meetings and morning meeting groups, and at the end of the day with these same groups to connect kids to each other and to Carroll as their school. We subscribe to the responsive classroom practices, which also creates opportunities for our kids to have input into the school culture. And in a more natural way, kids feel a sense of belonging when they feel that their academic needs are being met, that other kids might learn as they do. They may have similar lived experiences as they do, and that their teachers believe in them and are confident in what they can achieve. And as we commit to this whole child mentality of looking at their academic needs, as well as their social, emotional, and identity needs, we really do focus on the whole child. And we consider all things that make a child, how they identify culturally, racially, from a gender perspective, from a learning perspective, and their individual strengths and weaknesses, their likes and dislikes, their social, emotional needs. Knowing and serving all of those characteristics for each child really helps us to GEC our students more comprehensively and unlock some of the barriers for learning, and also build agency to reach their potential. As mentioned before, our teachers are taught to reach our students in this comprehensive whole child way. And you notice from the teacher training slide, our commitment to professional development And one of our concentrations in this training is centered around preparing our teachers to reach children in all those domains. And it really is our belief that that's comprehensive integrated approach that helps to really mobilize our students who have struggled before coming to Carroll to be more active and engaged learners. And as we are crafting an experience for children to be at Carroll, we also really value making sure that we provide lots of opportunities for kids to find success and to learn about who they are and to be able to foster those strengths and interests. And so we like to look at lots of opportunities to nurture kids in ways beyond their academics. And I want to illustrate how our program really behaves both in a specialized way, which you've been hearing about all morning, and a more normalized way that maybe matches with some of the programming and school experiences that your children currently have. So in our program, in all days throughout the academic year, our children also are involved in targeted interventions for that really responds to what they need most academically. And in addition, they're also very much involved in having classes in the arts and in music and performing arts, in physical education, in makers, in something called Bounders, which is our kind of outdoor education program. So they have times in their days where they are focusing on these other interests and talents of theirs. We have a really robust after-school program, particularly in the middle school, where there are sports and arts, there's study support, there are plays, many opportunities, and about 85% of our students participate in the after-school program. We have Friday program because, as Osa described, we have half day of school on Fridays, whereas pretty soon the snow is going to fly, and we send kids to Neshoba Valley Ski Area to do some skiing or tubing. We do hikes in area mountains and apple picking and go to museums and the like. So a very robust list of Friday programs for children to stay connected in the afternoon and to have fun. We have multiple clubs and affinity groups. We have community service initiatives ongoing. We have school mottos and mascots and songs and belief systems that we subscribe to. We also have a very robust summer program called Summer at Carroll that many of you may have already participated or learned about or had your child participate in, where there's a great opportunity to learn more about the Carroll School experience through a 5-week commitment in the summer. And please connect with us if you'd like more information about that. We have adjustment counselors in the building that really help with healthy socialization and natural problem solving amongst peers. We've talked about our advisory program. We have talent shows and end of the day assemblies on Fridays where we really celebrate accomplishments and the like. So these are really just examples of ways that we really function as a complete school, mirroring many schools, typical school environments to nurture what kids need above and beyond their academic development. So I'm going to pass it now on to Stacy so she can speak a little bit more about the process and the application next steps.
Thank you, Sue. And thank you to all my colleagues who helped to explain the program to you. So what to do next? I'm going to kind of take you through a little bit of the timeline of admission, talk a little bit about financial aid. So looking at the process, you're doing the first step, which is attending one of our information sessions. Some of you have already gone into Ravenna if you've decided to apply. Hopefully we've given you enough information today to sort of help you make the decision, should I apply or not? And as I said in the beginning, if you have questions, if you need more information, please reach out to us at admissions@carrollschool.org. Kristen can put that email address in the chat for you. So then you'd go into Ravenna, you would apply. As an admission team, there's a whole bunch of us on there, a cross-section of academics, and some of us from admission will review the application. At the same time, I also want to say, if you're someone who's thinking about financial assistance, we encourage you to apply as soon as possible. Please know, and this is important, an admission decision is entirely separate from a financial aid decision. Those are sort of blind categories where the admission committee does not know who needs aid and who doesn't. So you may very well get an admission decision and the financial aid will be separate. Of course, to decide whether to enroll or not, we would conjoin those two things so you understand your financial obligations. We use a third-party processing agent called SSS. There's a link to that application as well as to our Ravenna admission application on our website. And thereafter, we can be in touch regarding kind of any next steps. A few things I also wanted to let you know is we've had some questions around, we are offering live tours on December 1st. So those registration links we can also throw in the chat. There's going to be a whole lot of links in there, aren't there? So that you can register to come in person. Those tours are mainly geared towards adults. It's not typical for us to have students on them. We do, once we sort of go through the admission process a little bit, offer opportunities for students to come and see the campus. The reason for that is sometimes students actually tend to really like our campus and they tend to really want to come here. And we'd rather sort of navigate this, if possible, with the adults in the process, just to help us all understand if we all think this is a good idea before we bring a child into it. The other, I'd like to take a moment to also say on December 1st, we can put a link in the chat or just look on the website. There is one of our community speaker series hosted by the academic leadership on the language side, talking about in depth more what Allison West described about our flex area and focus blocks and sort of really the science of how we teach reading, how we configure groupings. I moderate this every year, and yet I learn every year from listening to this talk. I highly encourage it. As I said, we will have links to this recording. So if you are someone who's watching this recording and December 1st has already passed, both for that opportunity to tour or the community speaker series, this community speaker series links will be on our website. Tours we offer every month. So just please take a look at our website and feel free to sign up for any tours. So we're at about 10:28. I guide you to take a pause, refresh that water, tea, coffee, whatnot, take a quick bathroom break, and then please join us at the next part for the breakout sessions. Thank you so much. Happy Friday. We so appreciate you spending your time with us. See you soon. Bye-bye.